Alright, for today's industry insight, we're going to return to the topic of pricing your video game. And this is specifically having to do with the recent announcement from Ubisoft as of yesterday regarding Rainbow Six Siege. This was their team-based tactical shooter from, can't believe it's been about over 3 years since it first came out, that somehow managed to bounce back as word of mouth spread and the variety of the gameplay and options available. And every year, Ubisoft has put out a season pass worth of new characters, skins, and all that other great stuff. But the point is, the game has bounced back thanks to the games as a service model that they saw fit for it. However, it seems they've kind of burned through some of that goodwill a few days ago with an announcement that come February, they're going to be raising the price. And this is when things get very confusing. Because as with a lot of like the Ubisoft microtransaction games, there are multiple copies of the game that you can buy. So while I'm loading up Steam here and going to read this off, here it is. So when you first type in Rainbow Six Siege, it brings up the $15 purchase, which you think, that seems really great. But the $15 edition is your starter edition. Doesn't come with a lot of characters, you're not getting currency, in-game currency, stuff like that. The base price of the game is $40. You could buy the Year 2 edition for $70, and you can buy the complete edition for $90. And then on top of that, we have lots and lots of DLC, lots and lots of microtransactions, weapon skins, bundles, various characters you can buy with in-game currency, and so on and so forth. So the game has done well for itself, enough again to warrant 3 years of DLC. But what's going to happen is that in February, the base price, or what's considered the base price of the game, that's the $40 purchase, is going to be bumped up to $60. And one would assume that that would mean that the complete edition will also get bumped up. As an added, knife in the back there, or salt in the wound, they've also announced a horror theme event for February that will introduce loot boxes into Rainbow Six Siege, as well as to their other one. I think it's Wildlands, the other one I'm sure most of you probably know. But, again, getting back to the topic, this brings up one of the more touchy subjects when it comes to pricing your game, and that is whether or not it is warranted to raise a game's price. As we've said, games as a service over this last decade has really flipped the script on what it means to support a game and to continue developing it. It's no longer about finishing a game and moving on to the next. If that game does well, you can support for months or, as we're seeing in the most popular examples, years at a time. Payday 2, I think we're up to 4 years, but I think they're starting to wind down in 2018. Rainbow Six Siege, we're up to 3. And of course, the big, heavy names of the genre, or of this example, Team Fortress and League of Legends. The point is, all this adds up to more costs. And one of the challenges of games as a service is, of course, keeping the game profitable. Because it's very easy to have a successful launch and then just blow through that budget if no one's buying your DLC, expansions, and so on. But the question, though, is, at some point, should a game's value basically go over the original release and warrant a price increase? We saw a similar pushback with Fallout 4 when they decided to raise their season pass for the game. I think it went from $29 to $49 or $20 to $40, one of those two. And Bethesda's claim was so much was added in that pack that the value is now more than $20. And a lot of people weren't happy about that, and deservedly so. As we have said many times over in these talks and with developers, you can lower a game's price how many times you want. No one will ever complain to you why you lowered your game by $10. But when you raise your game up, it will piss people off. We mentioned this earlier or in the summer of 2017 when We Happy Few saw their 100% increase on their price. And there are several reasons why price increases aren't looked at favorably. The first one is very simple, and that is you are basically upping the price barrier to get into your game. And typically, as games go longer or they're out longer, their store lifespan goes down. As we've said before, for most major purchases or most major options on a store, 30 to 45 days, that window is usually the prime selling opportunity or when the game is going to be at its most profitable. After that, it becomes harder and harder to get people to buy your game outside of hardcore fans because they're looking at the next new thing and the next new thing. And typically, this is why game sales are important. It reignites interest in a game and can also get people who weren't interested in your game at $60 to try your game out maybe at $30 or $20 or who knows what kind of crazy offer you're going to have. Another problem is once you have released your game, you have set the bar of quality of what your game purchase is. And again, this quality is different for every video game out there. $20 that gets you, I don't know, pick any video game. Again, I've played so many games I can't think of one off the top of my head. But once this game is priced at $20, this is what you're saying someone's going to get when they buy it. Now, if you do add in more stuff over the game, whether it's through DLC or expansions, that stuff should not change your base content. And this is why it's not going to raise that initial purchase. And typically why most developers, if they're looking to get more money through games as a service, they will focus more on the DLC and the microtransaction end. With Payday 2, for instance, they have done Game of the Year editions and bundles of their DLC over the years. And again, they have not touched the original purchase. In fact, Payday 2's price has been discounted several times over the year. And actually, at this point, the base purchase of Payday 2 is free. You don't need to spend 1 cent for it. But there's, of course, a major reason why, and I'm sure any fans are about to point that out. The base version of Payday 2 is super bare bones. It is literally what the game was like in terms of DLC and additional weapons at launch. Now, the stuff that they've added for free, including the masks, heists, and community-driven weapons, that's stuff you're going to get. But the 49, geez, I can't believe there's been that much DLC, but 49 packs of DLC that have been released in the last, I was right. Oh, I'm sorry, they're at 5 years now. I'm sorry, 2018. But in the last 5 years of supporting the game, that stuff you will have to buy separately, or of course, get their Ultimate Edition, which is priced at, which I can't see because I own everything in that pack already. But nevertheless, the point is, the initial or the first barrier of entry to your game should remain as cheap or as low as possible, especially when we're talking about games as a service. And this is, I think, the problem that Ubisoft is having. Buying Rainbow Six Siege is going to be a very complicated affair for new players. Again, we have multiple versions of your game, in-game currency that buys unique stuff, all the DLC, and of course raising the price on top of that. And it becomes very hard for a new player to look at that and go, what the hell am I supposed to buy? I talked about this before when I wanted to look at Europa Universalis 4, and just getting an entire 2 pages down worth of DLC options. Because you may not think of it, but that stuff will scare someone away. It doesn't matter if your game is free or $50. When they see DLC offering or DLC offer like $300, that's going to push them away. And it's why a lot of people feel that AAA developers have gotten greedier in recent years. Because it's never just about a $50 or $60 purchase. You get the season pass on top of that, plus the in-game microtransactions. And we repeat this to the point that a $60 purchase now becomes more like $90 to $120 just to get going. And Ubisoft has done this with other games, such as For Honor as well, and I'm sure whatever else they're working on as we speak. But again, when it comes to price increases, the other major problem, what we talked about with We Happy Few last time, is that no one is really going to buy the fact that you have added value to your game. Because again, when you release your game, be it on early access, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, or as a retail, you have set that standard. You are saying, again, at whatever price it is, this is what you're getting. And if you're going to try and say that we're going to double that price or 1.5 times it, it's very hard to show someone that you have actually added 1.5 to 2 times the amount of content. You can say you've worked on that game. The We Happy Few developers said that. But it's very hard to show that. And that is a major point about game development. The consumer may only see a game that has 3 to 4 hours of content or 8 to 10 hours, but let's face facts. If you're a developer watching this, you can probably agree that it took you a lot more than 8 to 10 hours to design that experience. But the point, once again, is it's hard to sell someone on a price increase. We've been talking about this with We Happy Few. I've played that game at the very start of early access. I played it when they announced that price increase with the update they did, and I did not see a huge increase in terms of quality or content. And it's very hard when you're looking at it to say, now this game is worth $60. And there have been examples of games that have gone through fundamental changes. We can talk, of course, about the games from Arkin or the titles from Clay Entertainment, who released massive patches during their early access that radically changed the game. But once those games are out, they are not going to raise that price after a half a year or a year in time. And again, if they're going to do something, they're going to release DLC or expansion level DLC. Now, I hinted a few minutes ago at talking about early access because that's kind of the odd duck in this equation. As we've said, early access is the time to release your game not at its most complete. And typically, many developers will offer a founders package or a early subscriber discount to get people to try their game out. It could be 10 to 15% off. It could be more given the size of the game. But the point is, when you buy an early access game, most of the time you are not paying the actual price for it when it's released. And many developers will say that as we go through early access or at release, we may raise the price to justify the content. Now, in this case, it's a little bit more murky in terms of the issue. Like we said, some of the best early access games start out really good and they get fundamentally amazing over the course of it. Subnautica being a really good example of that. So in these cases, it does feel justified when you see the growth from A to Z to raise that price up. Now, how far you raise that price, that is a topic way too big for today. Excuse me. But like with a game like Rust, for instance, that's another example of a game that launched very early in terms of its price. And I'm sure they're going to be raising that up as the game develops. I think they may have been released, Ark is one that released DLC during early access. Ooh, wow. I just looked up Ark, and yes, they've actually gone up. When you buy the game, it's now a $60 purchase. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't $60 when it was in early access. But again, the point is, how do you sell someone the fact that you are raising the barrier to get into their game? And it is very hard to do that because you can say that adding a new biome or a new set of weapons or new enemies adds to your game. But does it add $15 to your price tag? I made this joke a long time ago about maybe we should have a video game appraiser where we look at a game and go, okay, multiplayer adds $15. If you have a new game plus, adds $5. If you have DLC, that takes away $5. Like, try to price a video game out like that. And obviously, it's not going to work. every game is different, every game's development is different, and every game has a different sense or a different perceived value, even within the same genre. But again, that is another can of worms that's too big to go into today. But to wrap up today's industry insight, again, when it comes to raising the price of your game, don't. It just creates a bullseye on your back for YouTubers to complain about it, for your fans to riot over it, and there are more creative ways of getting more money from people. Again, as we've seen with games as a service, microtransactions, loot boxes, gotchas, and so on. But typically, there are more ways to get money from people than kind of tainting or poisoning the well of your initial purchase. And as time goes on, it is better to lower the price of that initial fee. Because if you're trying to keep this community going and growing, you need new people to check things out. And you want to make it as easy as possible, especially when we start talking about games that are in the years in terms of development. But with that said, we're going to wrap things up here. For you folks watching this right now, what do you think about price increases? Do you think there is a justifiable point that we can see that? Is there a magic amount of content that gets added to a game that can justify a price increase? And for developers watching this, I'm curious, for those of you who have had a chance or decide to lower the price of your game, why did you do that, and at what point did you feel it was justified, in your opinion, to lower that price? Because again, once you say that your game is no longer 20 but 15 or 15 or 10 or whatever, you cannot go back on that. Let me know in the comments below, but thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to suggest a topic for me to cover in a future one, let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a good night. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/gwbicer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.